My ex cheated on me and blamed me for it. For a moment, I almost believed him. Then I saw the actual evidence. And everything became clear. The old coffee smell clung to the air in my little kitchen, a comforting mix of dark roast and the faint scent of cinnamon from the rolls I'd baked that morning. That was my life. Alara Vance, proprietor of The Daily Grind in Willow Creek, Vermont, a town so idyllic it felt lifted straight from a postcard. My mornings started before dawn, the clatter of ceramic mugs and the hum of the espresso machine a familiar symphony. My evenings, for the past 4 years, ended with Julian. Julian Hayes. My Julian. He was everything. Or so I thought. He worked at Innovatech Solutions, a big tech company just outside Burlington, and his career was always on an upward trajectory. He was charming, articulate, with eyes the color of a stormy sea that could soften into the kindest pools when he looked at me. He had a way of making me feel like the only person in his world, a skill I now understand is a hallmark of truly deceptive individuals. We had our routine, late evening walks by the Winooski River, quiet dinners at home, sometimes a movie night at the Grand Picture House downtown, our hands intertwined. I'd grown up in Willow Creek, and while some of my friends yearned for city lights, I found my joy in the predictable rhythm of our small community. I loved the way Mrs. Henderson from the bakery across the street would wave every morning, the knowing smiles from regulars at the Daily Grind, the absolute peace of a Vermont autumn. It grounded me. Julian, in his sleek suits and his talk of algorithms and market shares, seemed to fit perfectly into my cozy, analog life, like a modern art piece thoughtfully placed in a rustic cabin. He admired my work ethic, he said, my dedication to craft and community. He'd often tell me I was his anchor, his steady point in a chaotic world. And I believed him. Why wouldn't I? Every sign pointed to a shared future, a home filled with the smell of my coffee and his ambition. We talked about adopting a golden retriever, about painting the spare room a soft yellow for a future nursery. The kind of dreams that felt so real you could almost taste them. I remember one crisp October evening, the air smelling of wood smoke and damp leaves. We were sitting on our porch swing, the one with the slightly creaky chain on the left side, and he turned to me, his hand warm over mine, and said, "Alara, you're it for me. You're my forever." The sound of that creak, the scent of wood smoke, his words, they're burned into my memory, a perfect, beautiful lie. It wasn't just a relationship, it was a carefully constructed world where I felt safe, cherished, and utterly secure. A world built on sand, I now know, but at the time, it felt like granite. This normalcy, this absolute sense of belonging, is what made the eventual unraveling so utterly devastating. I had everything I thought I wanted, everything I had worked for, every dream nurtured. And it was all about to be ripped away, slowly, agonizingly, piece by piece. Looking back, the signs were there, little pinpricks in the fabric of our perfect life, easily dismissed by a heart desperate to maintain the illusion. The first real flicker of unease, I think, was about 6 months before everything crashed down. Julian started working later, much later, at Innovatech Solutions. He'd always been dedicated, but suddenly, crunch time seemed to extend for weeks on end. Project Nightingale, he called it. He'd come home after I'd already closed the Daily Grind, usually around 10 p.m., sometimes later. He'd smell faintly of some unfamiliar perfume, not the one I wore, not the one his colleague, Chloe, wore when she occasionally stopped by for a latte. When I asked gently, "Long day, babe? What's that scent?" he'd shrug it off. "Oh, probably just someone at the office. You know how it is, everyone crammed in meeting rooms." And I bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Then there was the phone. His phone became an extension of his hand, face down on tables, always locked, never left unattended. One evening, as we were winding down, watching some obscure documentary he'd insisted on, his phone buzzed. He picked it up with a practiced swiftness I hadn't seen before, glanced at it, and then tucked it back into his pocket without a word. "Who is that?" I asked, my voice lighter than I felt. He barely looked up from the screen. "Just a work email. Nothing important." But his jaw was a little too tight, his shoulders a little too stiff. It was a subtle shift, but I felt it. Still, I pushed it down. He's stressed with work, I told myself. It's Project Nightingale. A few weeks later, a casual conversation turned sharp. We were at the Rusty Anchor, our favorite local pub, enjoying a craft beer. Chloe, my best friend since high school, who also worked at Innovatech Solutions, albeit in a different department, mentioned something about Julian being seen having lunch with a new hire, a woman named Bethany. "Oh, is she new in your department, Julian?" I'd asked, genuinely curious. His face went instantly blank, then defensive. "Bethany? Who's Bethany?" "You must be mistaken, Chloe. I don't know anyone by that name." Chloe, bless her, looked confused. "But you were just with her at the cafeteria yesterday, talking about the new data analytics platform." Julian cut her off, his voice suddenly sharp. "Look, I have a lot of new hires under my wing, Chloe. You're probably just confusing faces. You know how big Innovatech is." The abruptness, the sheer force of his denial, felt disproportionate. Chloe, sensing the tension, quickly changed the subject. I brushed it off later, thinking maybe Chloe was mistaken. That's the insidious nature of confirmation bias, you know? When you want something to be true, like your partner being faithful, your brain actively seeks out and prioritizes information that supports that belief, while dismissing or downplaying anything that contradicts it. I wanted to believe Julian, so my mind conveniently overlooked Chloe's perfectly reasonable observation. This refusal to acknowledge dissonant information is a powerful self-preservation mechanism, but it leaves you vulnerable. Another instance, our anniversary. I'd planned a surprise weekend getaway to a cabin by Lake Champlain. I'd booked it months in advance, coordinating with the owner, even packed a small bag for him. I presented him with the keys and the itinerary. He looked at them, then at me, with a strange, almost pained expression. "Elara, honey, that's so thoughtful. But I can't. Project Nightingale. There's a critical deadline. I really can't leave." My heart sank. Not just because of the canceled trip, but because his eyes wouldn't meet mine. They flitted around, anywhere but my face. That should have been a screaming siren. Instead, I swallowed the disappointment and told him, "It's okay, we can reschedule." I think part of me was already so invested, so deeply committed to our shared future, that the idea of pulling away felt like losing a part of myself. This is where the sunk cost fallacy often takes hold. You've poured so much time, energy, and emotion into a relationship, into building this life, that the thought of abandoning it, even when presented with mounting evidence of its toxicity, becomes almost unbearable. You think, "I've put so much into this, I can't just give up now." You double down, hoping to recoup your investment, rather than cutting your losses. And that's exactly what I did. I kept investing, kept hoping, kept ignoring the growing cracks, not realizing I was just digging myself deeper into a hole. Every ignored red flag was another shovel of dirt on my own common sense. The real shift, the profound and chilling change, was in his emotional availability. Our conversations, once so vibrant and easy, became transactional. He'd ask about my day, but his eyes would be elsewhere, his responses clipped. Intimacy dwindled. He'd always been affectionate, but suddenly, touch felt forced. When I'd try to cuddle on the sofa, he'd find an excuse to get up or shift away, claiming he was too hot or uncomfortable. My mind, desperate to find a rational explanation, began to concoct scenarios. He's under immense pressure at work. He's suffering from burnout. Maybe I'm not being supportive enough. I even started blaming myself, internalizing his emotional distance as a failing on my part. This is the subtle groundwork for something far more sinister. The slow erosion of self-worth is a prerequisite for more overt psychological manipulation, a stage I was unknowingly walking into. I clung to the hope that the real Julian, the man who promised forever on the porch swing, would return once Project Nightingale was over. I desperately needed to believe that this was a temporary phase, a blip in our otherwise perfect narrative. But it wasn't. It was the prologue to a betrayal I couldn't have imagined. The catalyst, the absolute gut punch moment that ripped the veil from my eyes, happened on a Tuesday. A mundane, chilly Tuesday morning in late March, just as the last stubborn patches of snow were melting into muddy puddles. I'd woken up before Julian, as usual, to get to the daily grind. He'd told me he had an early meeting, so I figured he'd be up soon after. As I was making myself a quick cup of tea, I noticed his gym bag, which he usually packed the night before, was still unzipped on the floor by his side of the bed. It wasn't like him to be so disorganized. My eyes, almost subconsciously, drifted towards it. And there, tucked haphazardly amongst his gym clothes, was a small, perfectly square, deep blue box. It looked expensive, like a jewelry box. My heart immediately plummeted into my stomach, a cold, hard knot. It wasn't his birthday. It wasn't our anniversary again. It wasn't any special occasion we celebrated. My hands started to tremble. "No, Elara, don't jump to conclusions," a frantic voice inside me pleaded. Maybe it's for his mom. Maybe a work gift. Maybe. But the box wasn't wrapped. It was just sitting there. I picked it up, my fingers almost numb. The lid lifted with an unnerving ease, revealing a delicate silver necklace nestled on a velvet cushion. It was a tiny, intricately detailed hummingbird charm, sparkling with minuscule emerald eyes. It was undeniably beautiful. And it was absolutely not my style. I preferred simple, understated pieces. This was elegant, eye-catching, a statement. My breath hitched in my throat. I couldn't even breathe in that moment. A wave of nausea washed over me. I felt the blood drain from my face, a sudden, piercing coldness spreading through my limbs. The hummingbird. For some reason, that specific charm felt like a brand, a mark of something alien to our world. And then I saw it. Tucked beneath the velvet cushion, a small, handwritten card. Just a few words, in a feminine script I didn't recognize, on thick, creamy paper, to my sweet bird, Bethany. XOXO. Bethany. The name Chloe had mentioned at the Rusty Anchor. The name Julian had so vehemently denied knowing. The world tilted. The familiar scent of old coffee in my kitchen suddenly felt stifling, cloying. The cheerful chirping of a robin outside the window became an unbearable, mocking sound. My entire body started to shake, an uncontrollable tremor that started in my hands and quickly consumed me. It felt like every cell in my body was screaming. This wasn't just a red flag, this was a crimson banner, soaked in betrayal, waving in front of my face. I stared at the necklace, then at the card, then back at the necklace. The hummingbird's emerald eyes seemed to mock me. It was for her. Bethany. Not his mother, not a colleague. Sweet bird. A pet name. This wasn't a mistaken identity or a work lunch. This was intimate. This was personal. This was everything I had feared. The reality of it slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. Julian, my Julian, the man who had promised forever, was buying jewelry for another woman. And giving her a pet name. Just then, I heard the faint rustle of bedsheets from the bedroom. Julian was waking up. My heart began to pound a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. What did I do? Confront him? Pretend I hadn't seen it? My mind raced, utterly paralyzed by the shock and the sudden, overwhelming pain. I quickly, clumsily, placed the card back, put the necklace back in its box, and shoved the box back into the gym bag, trying to make it look untouched. My hands were still shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I felt dirty, like an intruder in my own life. I grabbed my keys, muttered a quick, choked "love you" towards the bedroom, which I knew he wouldn't hear, and fled the daily grind, the clatter of my own footsteps echoing too loudly in the sudden silence of the house. The entire drive to the coffee shop was a blur of tears and ragged breaths. I felt like I was watching my life play out from outside my own body, an unwilling audience to my own destruction. The creaking floorboard on the left side of the porch swing, a sound I once associated with comfort, now felt like a taunt, a reminder of the lies whispered there. This was the moment. The exact, excruciating moment everything changed. And it was just the beginning. That day at the daily grind was a fog. I served lattes, smiled at regulars, and made small talk, all while a frantic, desperate investigation was already beginning in my mind. The image of the hummingbird necklace, the elegant script of "To my sweet bird, Bethany," played on an agonizing loop. When I finally got home, Julian was already there, acting perfectly normal, making dinner, humming some tune. He even hugged me, kissing my hair, telling me I smelled like coffee and home. The hypocrisy was a physical pain in my chest. I couldn't confront him immediately. My mind, reeling from the initial shock, needed more. I needed proof so undeniable that he couldn't gaslight his way out of it. And that's exactly what I decided to find. My investigative journey started small, almost imperceptibly. First, I checked our joint bank account statements online. Nothing overtly suspicious, but a few larger than usual withdrawals from ATMs I didn't recognize, in areas he wouldn't typically frequent for work. He often paid with his personal card for work lunches, which he would later expense, so those didn't show up on our joint account. This meant I needed to go deeper. The next evening, while he was in the shower, a tactic I hated myself for, but felt utterly compelled to do, I grabbed his phone. My hands were clammy, my heart racing like a hummingbird's wings. I knew his passcode, our anniversary date. I scrolled through his recent texts. And there it was. A string of messages, not from a contact saved as Bethany, but from an unsaved number. The language was sickeningly familiar, affectionate, playful, intimate. Can't wait to see you tonight, my sweet bird. Dinner at 8, followed by a kissy face emoji. And then, a message from Julian. Almost forgot. Project is wrapping up. Going to surprise Alara with a romantic dinner at the Rusty Anchor tonight. Wish me luck. The sheer audacity. The casual cruelty. He was setting up a fake alibi for me while planning to be with her. My stomach lurched. It wasn't just emotional betrayal. It was a carefully constructed web of deceit, an elaborate performance. I took screenshots, my fingers shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Then I dug deeper. His email. A travel confirmation, buried deep in his spam folder, for a weekend trip to Montreal, 2 weeks prior. For 2 people. Names, Julian Hayes and Bethany Miller. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a fleeting affair. This was an ongoing, planned, deeply involved betrayal. I spent the next few days in a daze, a phantom of myself, going through the motions of the daily grind. Every smile I forced, every cheerful, good morning, I uttered, felt like a lie. I felt like an actress in a play I hadn't auditioned for, performing for an audience who had no idea my world was crumbling. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My old friend Chloe, noticing my pallor and the dark circles under my eyes, insisted I meet her for coffee. Not at the daily grind, but at a quiet spot a town over, the quiet corner. Alara, honey, you look like you haven't slept in a week. What's going on? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I just stared at her, tears welling up. It's Julian, I choked out, and then the dam broke. I told her everything. The late nights, the phone, the denied Bethany, the necklace, the texts, the Montreal trip. Chloe listened, her face slowly turning from concern to anger. I knew it, she whispered, her voice tight. I knew something was off. That Bethany, she's been flaunting some new silver hummingbird necklace at work. Everyone's been talking about it. And get this, she just moved into a new apartment, and guess who helped her move last weekend? Julian. He told me he was helping his cousin move furniture. The pieces clicked into place, one after another, forming a devastatingly clear picture. This is the point where the mind, desperately trying to protect itself, engages in what we call cognitive dissonance. My reality, that Julian loved me, that we had a future, was clashing violently with the undeniable evidence of his betrayal. My brain was screaming for an explanation, a way to reconcile these two opposing truths. The easier path would have been to rationalize Julian's behavior, to find excuses, to continue believing the narrative he had carefully crafted. But Chloe's confirmation, the specific detail of the necklace, the moving boxes, it was too much. The dissonance became unbearable, and the truth, no matter how painful, had to win. Armed with this fresh wave of information, I spiraled further into my investigation. I checked his old phone bills, noticing a new number he called almost daily for extended periods. Cross-referencing it online, I found it belonged to Bethany Miller. I even drove by her new apartment building, a sleek, modern complex on the outskirts of Burlington. And there, parked in the lot, was Julian's distinctive silver sedan. Not just once, but twice. The second time, I saw him walking out with her, laughing, his arm casually around her waist. The way he looked at her, the way he laughed, it was the look he used to reserve for me. The deep, aching pain in my chest intensified, a physical manifestation of my broken heart. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. When I finally confronted him, it was not with accusations, but with cold, hard evidence. I printed out the text messages, the email confirmation for Montreal, even a photo I'd discreetly taken of his car at Bethany's apartment. I laid it all out on our kitchen table, a brutal tableau of his deception. He walked in from work, saw the papers, and his face, usually so composed, went utterly pale. For a split second, I saw fear in his eyes. "What is all this, Alara?" he asked, his voice shaking. "Don't even try," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the hurricane raging inside me. "Bethany. The hummingbird necklace. The Montreal trip. The texts. Your car at her apartment. Tell me, Julian, what is Project Nightingale really about?" He looked at the evidence, then at me. And then, he did what people like him do best. He lashed out. "You went through my phone? My emails? My private information? What kind of insane, insecure woman does that, Alara? This is an invasion of privacy. You're suffocating me. This is your fault. If you hadn't been so clingy, so needy, maybe I wouldn't have felt the need to seek comfort elsewhere." The sheer audacity of it. He stood there, surrounded by undeniable proof of his betrayal, and tried to twist it, to make it my fault. This is classic gaslighting. It's a form of psychological manipulation where a person makes you question your own memory, perception, or sanity. By blaming me, by painting me as insane and needy, he was trying to undermine my reality, to make me doubt the very evidence I was holding. He wanted me to believe that my entirely rational response to his deceit was the problem, not his deceit itself. He wanted to maintain control, to keep me off balance, to avoid accountability. For a fleeting, horrifying moment, I almost believed him. His conviction was so absolute, his anger so genuine-looking, that a tiny, insidious voice in my head whispered, "Is he right? Am I too much? Did I drive him to this?" That's the power of gaslighting. It's designed to make you lose your grip on reality, to erode your self-trust. But then, I looked down at the printed texts again, at the Montreal itinerary, at the small photo of his car parked outside her building. No, this wasn't my fault. This was his choice. This was his betrayal. The fallout was swift and brutal. The next few weeks were a blur of raw emotion, legal discussions, and the painful reconstruction of my life. Julian, despite the overwhelming evidence, continued to deny, deflect, and blame. He packed his bags and left that night, his parting words a venomous, "You'll never find anyone who loves you like I did, Alara. You pushed me away." The emotional impact of those words, even knowing they were lies, left scars. It's hard to untangle yourself from someone who has deliberately warped your perception of reality. The legal separation was complicated. We weren't married, but we owned the house jointly. It involved lawyers, difficult conversations about equity, and the bitter taste of compromise. I wanted him out of my life completely, but there were practicalities. He contested everything, dragged his feet, making every step an agonizing process. He sold his share of the house to me at a slightly inflated price, and I, desperate for closure, agreed. It meant tightening my belt at the daily grind, but the thought of him having any lingering claim over my sanctuary was unbearable. Socially, it was a different kind of mess. Willow Creek is a small town. Gossip travels faster than the Winooski River in springtime. Some people, those who only knew Julian's charming facade, expressed sympathy for him, saying it was a shame things didn't work out. Others, who knew me and saw my pain, were supportive. Chloe was a rock, helping me navigate the emotional turmoil and even covering shifts at the daily grind when I couldn't face the world. She'd bring me takeout from the Willow Bistro and just sit with me in silence, often until the early hours. My parents were devastated but unwavering in their support. Learning about traumatic bonding was crucial in my healing. I read about how relationships with narcissistic or manipulative individuals often create an intense emotional attachment that is difficult to break, even when abuse is present. It's a cycle of abuse, followed by periods of affection or remorse, creating a powerful, intermittent reinforcement that keeps the victim hooked. This explained why, even after knowing the truth, I still had moments of intense longing for the old Julian, for the man who promised forever. It wasn't love, it was an addiction to the highs and lows, a desperate hope for the return of the idealized version of him. Recognizing this helped me understand that my struggle wasn't a weakness, but a natural, albeit painful, psychological response to prolonged manipulation. Months turned into a year. I threw myself into the daily grind, expanding our menu, hosting open mic nights, making it more vibrant than ever. I started taking yoga classes at Harmony Yoga Studio and found a surprising solace in the quiet strength it built. The emptiness Julian left was slowly, painstakingly, filled with self-worth, community, and a deeper understanding of who I was without him. I came to understand that Julian likely exhibited traits of the dark triad: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. His charming exterior, his grandiosity, his cunning manipulation, his complete lack of empathy for my pain, his willingness to exploit and deceive, these were not just flaws, but fundamental aspects of his personality. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a master manipulator, incapable of true intimacy or genuine care. He thrived on what's known as narcissistic supply, the constant validation and attention he extracted from others, regardless of the emotional cost to them. My emotional investment, my devotion, my pain, it all fed his ego. Today, the scent of old coffee in my kitchen is still comforting. The porch swing still creaks, but now it's just a sound, not a reminder of a broken promise. I still wake before dawn, but the clatter of ceramic mugs feels like a celebration of my own resilience, not a prelude to someone else's deception. I learned the hard way that sometimes the most beautiful dreams are built on the most dangerous lies. But I also learned that when those dreams shatter, you can pick up the pieces and build something real, something stronger, something that, this time, is truly yours. The journey was excruciating, filled with moments I thought I wouldn't survive, but I did. I survived and I thrived. And I finally, truly understand what it means to be free.